So 25 years ago, my younger sister Sandy asked me, her sister the rabbi, to officiate at her wedding. My sister was engaged to Mike, a self-proclaimed hippie who had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with organized religion. He was became bar mitzvah at a congregation in New Jersey and had not set foot in a religious institution since. Sandy asked the question, and I said yes. 10 years later, my older sister Nancy got engaged and asked me to officiate at her wedding. Nancy was engaged to Rini, a lovely woman who I would call a cultural Christian. Rini celebrated Christmas and Easter with gusto, but had nothing to do with organized worship whatsoever. My family and I had known that Nancy's a lesbian for many years, and we embraced Rini with open arms. She was absolutely head over heels in love with my sister, and she was willing to bring Jewish traditions into their home. Nancy asked the question, and I responded, no. Over the long period of my husband's childhood, my mother-in-law used to tell her 3 children, if you intermarry, you grant Hitler a posthumous victory. Had I too bought into the idea that intermarriage is the arch enemy of the Jewish people? That it leads to the extinction of the Jews? For about 2.5 decades, I taught at Hebrew Union College, the Reform Movement's rabbinical and cantorial seminary. I noticed over the past several years an uptick in the number of students with one Jewish parent and one parent from a different faith tradition. You see, and you may know, that in 1983, Reform rabbis passed a resolution that is misrepresentedly or misnomer as patrilineal descent, but they passed a resolution in 1983 that said a child of the child of one Jewish parent, whether that parent is the mother or the father, is presumed Jewish so long as that same child undergoes acts of Jewish public identity, like a bris, a girl baby named Simchat Bat, B'nai Mitzvah, and is exclusively educated within the Jewish fold. Given that those kids began to come of age, some of those folks who were under the patrilineal descent decision decided to serve the Jewish people, and they entered rabbinical and cantorial school. They began to sit in my classrooms. I would say over the past 4 or 5 years, about 25 to 30% of the students in my classrooms were of one Jewish parent. I began to rethink this notion I was telling myself that in-married is the Jewish ideal. I saw the product of the so-called products of intermarriage before me, and it looked pretty good. And then I began to teach at the 92nd Street Y. I taught many rounds of what's known as Derech Torah, the 30-week-long Introduction to Judaism class, which attracts many couples who are thinking of intermarrying or may already have intermarried. I saw in these couples loving relationships, and I began to notice that it's not intermarriage that's hard, it's marriage that's hard. Of course, there are unique challenges for those who intermarry, and I think a lot of it stems from the fact of how we identify the Jewish people. Are we a religion, or are we a cultural or ethnic group? Now, for a couple who is newly engaged and will be intermarrying, they're caught up almost instantaneously once they become engaged in all the preparations and hoopla for their wedding. And as you know, wedding ceremonies, marriage ceremonies, are based on religious traditions. They have religious frameworks. So in the beginning, it seems as though religious differences might cause conflict and difference, and indeed it does for these couples who are intermarrying. But over the long haul, I would submit that it's cultural references that may, and Jewish cultural references at that, or Christian cultural references, or Muslim, whatever the different religion may be, that begin to raise their head. As I see it, we at BJ are right now in a long, ongoing conversation between what I'll call the Alephes and the Bets. The Alephes cherish the age-old wisdom that Jews have given the world for centuries. And so they advocate hanging on and rooting the Jewish people through those age-old traditions and long-standing convictions. Bets, on the other hand, cherish the dynamism that is built in, that's inherent to Jewish life, and that turns its wheels with each successive generation. Bets advocate for diversity around the Jewish table. Whether you're an Aleph or a Bet or somewhere in between, I am certain that all of us have the well-being of the Jewish people at heart. For me, I'm a pragmatist. I am not in the business of assessing or measuring or judging or evaluating somebody's commitment to Jewish life. I am, however, in the business of invigorating somebody's commitment to Jewish life. I have seen firsthand in all these couples that I've counseled over the years that when a Jew falls in love with a non-Jew, all kinds of mixed emotions and inchoate thoughts get stirred up. I have seen more often than not a Jew come back to Judaism as a result of that confusion. A Jew who's looking to re-educate him or herself as an adult. Perhaps the last time they set foot in a classroom was when they were 13, a Jewish classroom was when they were 13 or 14. I have witnessed that had that intermarriage not occurred, that Jew may not have taken a second look or a third look or a 17th look at him or herself as a Jew. I must confess that I wonder from time to time what kind of Jew my sister Nancy may have become had I given her and Rini a fair shake.